I think that the students, while they do their best to listen to me on a daily basis, it's great for them to hear a different voice and people that are actually in the professions that they are considering. So all of our panelists today had a very different perspective and viewpoint that they were able to offer, and I think that's incredibly valuable for students. So that's why first time doing like a big panel like this. I've used it for a couple of like one-off discussions for like speakers for classes before, but first time doing something big like this. Yeah. So like their practical, real-world, present experience is great. Like I can pull out news articles to make things current and relevant, but hearing right from the person what they're experiencing and why that's a big deal to them, that's way better in my books. I gave the panelists kind of a rough framework of what I was thinking of talking about, but they did a really good job of kind of using that little question as a jumping off point and then sharing lots more information that was really valuable. So I think that it went really well, and I credit that to the panelists. Like not only their willingness to be here and kind of participate, but they really put some effort into crafting their answers.
So I'm Julie Dreisiger. I'm with the Business and Education Harsh. We brought our banner along today because we're sort of a hidden gem. A lot of teachers use our services, and that's what happened today with Mr. Doehn. He reached out to me, and we have a roster of speakers in our bureau. We call it our Speakers Bureau, with probably about 500 to 600 people in our community, like these wonderful people here, who volunteer. They're not paid to come today. They volunteer to come out and share their career story, their journey, their expertise with students like yourself. So I am so fortunate to have to live in this community. Waterloo Region is amazing for what people will give back, and it's something I want to stress to you. Volunteer. Volunteering is the best way to get experience, to learn what you like, what you don't like. I think these people will all agree. They probably started volunteering when you were a teenager and you continue to volunteer. And I think it's the most rewarding thing is to give back like this. So I just want to say thank you to these people who took time out of their busy days, especially these with their background in law. They have lots to be busy with. So thank you. We offer many other programs, and maybe at the end we can talk a little bit more. And I just want to thank Mr. Doehn for working with us today to have this happen.
Pleasure. Our for
Okay.
Okay. So I know that the group here in the audience, they're really excited to know kind of who you are and what your role is. So we're just going to do a quick little intro going on the line here. So Ashley, if you want to start us off.
Hi everyone. My name is Ashley Schuitema. I'm a lawyer. I work at Waterloo Region Community Legal Services. We're the local legal aid clinic, so we provide free services to low-income people in the community. My practice is mostly around employment law. I run a project on preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. And also, I just represented a bunch of people living at the Victoria Street encampment. And we were successful in launching a charter challenge to protect their rights so they wouldn't be evicted. We do a lot of eviction prevention work at our clinic, housing people that are going to be evicted, and people have questions about their tenancy. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you so much. Gravy the next.
My name's first I'd say that for Ashley, that decision that she was a part of was a very big deal. So I'm not sure if everybody would understand, but for me, I work at ETS, which is ETS Automation, which is a company just on the ramp to the 401. So I don't like speaking in front of judges. I don't like the high pressure of winning or losing in court cases. So that's a big deal for lawyers that do that. And to have a decision that's reported informing law is a very, very big deal in our profession. So just acknowledging that, and hope you guys read up on that. So I'm what you call an in-house lawyer. So I was in private practice at a law firm for a few years, and now I work at a company. I'm an employee of that company, and I'll handle basically stuff before it gets serious enough to need an external lawyer that probably would then be licensed to practice within that jurisdiction where the problem is. So ATS is a multinational company, so there's facilities in all across Europe, throughout the US, and into Asia. So I just need to know enough about the law and what our business needs to help them. And if it gets serious enough, then we would bring in an external lawyer more similar to the others sitting with me at this panel.
Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Kelly Griffin, and I am a lawyer in private practice at Sutherland Lawyers in Kitchener. I have a varied practice. I do real estate law, so I help people buy and sell homes, residential homes. I help businesses buy and sell real estate, so commercial real estate, also with commercial leasing. So if you have a business and you're going to rent a space from a landlord, I will help with that. I do wills and estates, so I help people prepare their wills for when they're going to die and who gets their stuff. Powers of attorney, so who can help them if they're not capable. I help executors administer estates when somebody has passed away. And I'm also a business lawyer, so I help businesses with their legal needs. So I would be somebody that Graham may hire if it requires external counsel. A big part of my business practices, I help people buy and sell businesses. So that's my.
Perfect. Thank you. Last but certainly not least, Wendy, you want to do a little intro?
My name is Wendy Dance. I'm the Vice President of Claims for the fourth largest, I believe we're the fourth largest insurance brokerage in the world right now. I work closely with contract law and civil law. So my clients have undertaken a purchase of an insurance program that is intended to protect them against unforeseen loss. At times, the issuers of those insurance contracts don't seem to understand the contracts they've entered into and will attempt to deny coverage. So a large part of my team's job every day is fighting for what's right for our clients in the terms and conditions of the contract, but also educating clients about tort and civil law that may be lawsuits that may be facing them and their businesses, some that may be insurable and some that may not.
Okay, thank you. So what's really interesting is that all four of our panelists here are coming at the law from very different and unique perspectives. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. Like we could fill this room with people that have different perspectives or different jobs that come at the law from different angles. So it's really nice to have a varied group here. So thank you very much for all of you for coming. So I've prepared a couple of questions I'm going to ask our panelists. I thought that we'd start off by asking you some questions that will help you to relate some of the younger crowd that we have in here today. So some of us will have to dig back deep into our memory banks to answer some of these, but we'll see how it resonates with the youth of today. All right, so the first question I had was, what did you enjoy most about high school? We can just go down the line again. Sounds good.
Sure. So I actually made some really great friendships. I'm still friends with a handful of people from high school, and it's really nice to be able to stay in touch with them. So I'd say that's certainly like the fond memory when I look back on high school. It's the friendships, and I'm so thankful for those friendships. So yeah, that's probably the best.
I kind of hated high school. Kind of gives me a lot of anxiety to be sitting here, to be honest, but you have to do it, so here we are.
I'd probably fall somewhere in between. I have a couple of good friends from high school, but kind of like Graham, I like post-secondary a lot better than I liked high school. I'd say the one good thing about high school was the interaction with teachers in terms of that one-on-one to get feedback to really help if you were struggling. It's a lot easier in high school than it is to maybe search out somebody in a post-secondary environment. So that one-on-one was probably the most beneficial.
Lunch. Another half of a top for me. High school was okay for me. I did really well in high school, so I was a little bit bored, so I wasn't as focused. Socially, that was perfect for me. And lunch in the lounge would have been my thing. But I did learn. I learned things, and I got a little bit of direction and some great teachers. So.
I was a big fan of lunch as well, so still every day I'll share. Okay, so the next question I'm going to ask, we just go reverse order just to mix things up a little bit. So I want to start out by just understanding where you went for your undergraduate education, so or wherever you did after post-secondary. So if you can tell me where you went, and then tell me one positive thing about that experience, and then one that was maybe more on the negative side, just to balance things out a little bit. If you don't mind.
So I went to college at Conestoga locally. I did start in a program that I had picked because it was the thing I did best in high school. It turned out not to be for me. I started in accounting, I did 1 year, but it was not for me. And again, that was just something that I picked because mom and dad say you have to go to school and you have to pick something. So it's okay to make different decisions. It's okay to change your mind over time. I also realized that at that age in my life, I still wasn't focused enough to direct my energy in a self-directed fashion to make it through classes, to go to classes sometimes when I have all this freedom. So I actually switched after my first year of school. I stayed at Conestoga, but I switched to a part-time program. I enjoyed working and I had started working in my profession. So I continued on and did a business diploma. I did a management diploma. And then the great thing about my industry is it offers professional education that can gear you towards wherever you're going to land or wherever you desire to learn in the industry. So I've got a few professional designations as well in the insurance industry.
So I did my first degree at Queen's University in Kingston. I did a 4 years honors psychology degree. Then I went to law school and I got my my law degree. So I did 2 post-secondary stints, which if you're going to be a lawyer, you have to, you need to get that law degree. And so the thing that I really loved about university was it taught you how to think critically. So it taught you to look at an issue in more than one light. There's not just one answer. There's often 2 or 3 ways to go about getting an answer, and in really thinking critically and examining the information that you are given to say, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with it? Or how would I approach it differently? So I found that to be really invaluable, and it helps my job on a daily basis. The struggle, I would say, is learning how to be accountable to yourself. So, I had 5 years of high school because at the time there was OAC. And so I was 19 when I started university. But even at 19 and what I'd like to think was a responsible 19, all of a sudden you're living on your own and you're responsible for paying the rent. You're responsible for getting the groceries. You have to get yourself up and go to school. You have to do your homework because nobody else is going to do that for you. And oftentimes it's 100% exam. So it's your job to kind of make sure that you're diligent enough. And it's a struggle that first year to kind of learn what works best for you. What works for your neighbor might not work for you. And so I'd say that was the biggest struggle. And then once you find it and you know how that works, then you can be really successful. And the good thing is there's a lot of programs at school to help you with that, to help you figure that out. You don't have to do it on your own. So I'd say that was probably the biggest struggle.
As I said, I hated high school. I loved everything about university. I did okay in high school, not great. I didn't get into Queens, didn't get into Trent. I went to Carleton. I liked it pretty good, but then transferred my second year and finished my degree at McGill. And then I went to Queens for law school. So I guess three there, but just, I think once you go off to school, maybe you go in your own city too, but you can, you meet different people, you meet people with very different interests than you have and very different backgrounds than you have. And then you also meet a lot of people that are very similar to you, but maybe grew up in a different town or city. At university as well, lots of clubs, to join. So you're going to meet other people, kind of make decisions for yourself, and really find what you're interested in studying, and to be studying those with people that are also interested in that, not just kind of like me in high school taking physics because I was supposed to. Instead, studying and doing well in subject matters that you're interested in.
So I did my undergrad at the University of Guelph. I studied criminal justice and public policy. It was a 4-year program. And then I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, so I taught English in Korea for a year, and then I came back and still wasn't really sure. I worked at RAM in their legal department. I took some courses at University of Waterloo to sort of upgrade some of my grades because I was thinking law school might be where I wanted to go. And then I ended up going to law school at Dalhousie, which is in Halifax. For me, when I was doing undergrad, I grew up in a really small town. I grew up in Baden. And so transitioning to Guelph, I was like, ooh, it's such a big city. I'm going to take the bus. And my roommates from Toronto always laughed at me. But I found like moving into a city and being away from my family kind of hard. So the first year I felt like a little bit homesick, particularly in the first semester. And then I got used to it and I was doing okay. And then in second year, I lived off campus and I found that to be a challenge because the idea of having to be responsible for yourself, I had to like get up and catch the bus and get to school for a certain point in time. And I found that really challenging. I also thought I wanted to do a minor in psychology. So I was taking courses that were just like, I wasn't that interested in and I wasn't doing that well in them. Finally, in third year and fourth year, I started taking courses that I actually really were interested in and were more geared to criminal justice and public policy. So I started to excel in those courses. But yeah, university and law school, any sort of post-secondary is a really great place to get to meet people who have similar interests to you. So that's a really nice place. And there's lots of clubs. When I was in law school, I joined and chaired the Dalhousie Feminist Legal Association, and I met a bunch of like young feminist lawyers that were interested in practicing things similar to me and had similar interests to me. And so that was really engaging and nice. So there's lots of challenges along the way, and I think it's okay if you definitely don't know where that path is taking you. There's lots of opportunities to like figure that out along the way and to make changes. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Thanks for your answers there. So the last chunk I had for this section was what's one piece of advice that you would offer high school students who are interested in pursuing a career in law? We can start.
Sure. I'd say have lots of conversations. So I grew up in a family that didn't have any lawyers. I'm the first of my family to go to post-secondary. My parents didn't finish high school. So like I didn't know what it meant to be a lawyer. And I'm happy that I am, and I really enjoy my job. But along the way, I had a lot of conversations with people who were lawyers, a lot of conversations with people who were judges, people who maybe had a law degree but were non-practicing. And so I would say if it's something that you're interested in, just seek out people to have those conversations. Find out what their day-to-day looks like and think about like if that's something that's actually interesting to you and something you can see yourself doing. And people are very, very, in my experience, people are so willing to have those conversations. Like anyone's willing to make time to have a phone call or meet someone for coffee to chat about their day and what they're doing. And so if you think it's something you're interested in, have those conversations to find out and don't give up either. Like if it's something that you think you're interested in, but maybe like I wrote the LSAT a number of times. And so that don't make that a hurdle. If it's something you really want to do, you can certainly do it and study and get a good grade to get in. So yeah, that's it.
I think I'd say all the same things as Ashley would. I also don't have any. My dad went to university, my mom went to college, but I'm first lawyer of any of my family or extended family. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and it kind of just, just kind of kept taking the next step, and then there I was. It's a very long ways between being in grade 11 or 12 and then actually being a licensed lawyer. So the different sort of hurdles and steps are kind of different for everybody. There's things that might be very challenging for one person, and if they can get over that hurdle, then the rest can be really easy. Other people will be really easy for a long time, and then it'll be something like in fitting, like getting a job at a law firm that you need at the end, right? And having to get through interviews. So very kind of what you think of as being sort of a more basic sort of thing. So as Ash is saying, like almost everybody works, and almost everybody works every day, and so people know what they do. So I wouldn't restrict it to being lawyers, but just like talk to people and see what they do. And even if you become a lawyer, like now I work in manufacturing, right? So I work with a lot of people, a lot of different educational backgrounds or skill sets that all have to work together to coordinate very complicated projects. So, if you there's someone you like, you get along with well enough, just ask them what they do every day. And maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they're not. Maybe they're in an industry that you'd be interested in, that you'd like to be a lawyer in. Or maybe you find that maybe being a lawyer isn't what you want to do because you're more interested in the like for me, ATS builds big manufacturing systems. So like these, multi-million-dollar, multi-year projects. I don't do the cool stuff. The cool stuff's done by the engineers, right? Like that's the only thing that's really that interesting. I'm digging through a bunch of stuff that bores the eyes out of these engineers because they just want to build really cool equipment, right? So that's what I'm good at. I can help them doing that. And I like my day-to-day work, but not everybody wants to sit down and read a 80-page contract in 2.5 hours, right? So same thing as Ashley's saying, but not even to worry. I don't think even worry too much about the end point of being a lawyer if that's what you're considering, just to kind of keep your mind open and talk to people.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar. I too am a first generation lawyer. My parents went to college. My grandparents, it wasn't an option. Like it just was not an option. And so, for me, I never set out to be a lawyer. That's not what I wanted to do when I was younger. I wanted to be a psychologist and a professor. And it was in doing my thesis and sitting in a lab for 8 hours a day doing statistics that I realized that I was not good at that. I enjoyed the psychology aspect. I did not enjoy stats. I am much better with words than I am with numbers. And so I was forced with making a decision in terms of what do I want to do. Thankfully, I had kept my options open in terms of education and taking a bit of a broader, I did sociology, I did psychology, I had some science under my belt, and I had good grades. That was the other thing. My grades were good enough that it gave me options in terms of pursuing something past a first degree level. And so I was trying to figure out what to do, and somebody recommended law to me and said, well, having known you for the last little bit, I think maybe you'd be a good lawyer. And when I graduated, it was 9/11, and there were not a lot of great job opportunities at the time because a lot of companies lost a lot of people. And so I thought, well, the worst thing I can do is just kind of go out and fumble my way around with a 4-year psychology degree. And so I thought I should stay in school. So I took the LSATs and I applied to law school and I got in, and I thought, well, if I don't want to be a lawyer, that's fine. It's another degree under my belt. Again, it opens up more doors for me. I ended up really enjoying it, and kind of to my surprise, I enjoyed what I was learning. I was fortunate to be able to get summer jobs in law firms and articling jobs in law firms to give me the practical experience, and then was hired back at a firm in Toronto. And so I kind of just became a lawyer in that. And it sounds really weird, but you talk to enough people, and people, whether it's law or something else, they kind of figure out what they like and what they're good at, and then all of a sudden they have this great career. But it's by keeping the doors open and keeping your options available to you that allows you to kind of pivot when things inevitably go a bit sideways, because they will at some point. And so, yeah, I did that, and I have had a bit of a varied career as a lawyer. I've been the Bay Street lawyer. I've been in-house for 2 major insurance companies. And now I'm in a small firm doing private practice with small and medium-sized businesses and individuals, which I grant a variety of backgrounds and experiences, and I get to help them every day. And so, it's a bit of a roundabout way of getting there, but it's by keeping those options available and the doors open, but you never know kind of where you might end up.
Tough act to follow with those two.
Yes, to follow. I would echo what Kelly said. Don't limit yourself. Keep your doors and your options open. Also, don't follow a path that you think somebody else thinks you should follow. Find something that you're passionate about. Find an area that you're passionate about. Speak to other people. Learn about what they do. If you are interested in law, learn about what someone in their industry does in law, like our earlier panelists have said. Don't write off that I want to do X and I want to be a Bay Street lawyer and I don't think I can. That doesn't mean you can't be in law. It doesn't.
Okay, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Thanks for that. So what I want to do now is open up to the group for some questions. Now, I know some of these individuals that they usually need a minute to chat before they generate a question. So you all, a minute or so to chat, to look around you. What kind of questions would you like to ask our panelists? Right now, we're going to focus our questions on the topic of what their kind of after high school education looked like. We're going to get into career stuff after a break. So,
Melissa Patelli. Okay. You're like, what was it, psychology or something? That she was going for?
Are you asking about like what her undergraduate pursuits were before she?
No, that's what you're talking about how you hate like statistics and everything, and you're like a lawyer for real estate, right?
Yeah, so when I did my psychology degree, I did an honors degree. So in order to get your honors, you have to do a thesis and you have to defend a thesis. And part of that is doing experiments, and statistics come along with that. I was not very good at statistics, I will be honest. I got the minimum amount I needed to get past that part. But in terms of my law practice, I do wills and estates, real estate, and business law. And so there are numbers involved, but I get to have the benefit of saying, we need to bring in the accountant and the tax advisors. So I know enough, but I can't actually give advice in those areas because I'm not licensed to give tax advice. So I get other people who are great at numbers to come and help me and my clients with that side of things.
Because the nice thing is that you don't have to be amazing at all things. You can specialize.
Well, and I think that's one of the benefits about being a professional. You need to know what you are competent to do and what you are not competent to do. So, I'm a lawyer. I can't do what Ashley does, and I can't do what Graham does. I have my particular area.
I do.
Well, but I kind of look at it as a professional athlete. They're probably good enough to make do in any sport, but maybe they're really good at football or they're really good at soccer, right? And that's kind of what the law is like. You have your own specialized area, but you can probably make do in the other areas and pick up pretty quickly because you know the basics. But you need to know when to call in experts and know your own limitations.
Do you have follow-up, G?
Well, as you said that you can get like 1 people for your statistics, like 1,000 people, we should be able to do that for psychology too. You should ask where people are around you.
I think when you're the one doing the experiment, you're expected to be able to do the stats on your own. And if you're not, you're paying for that person out of your own pocket.
Sounds almost like a mechanic taking the car to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for the question. Any other questions about that? Yes, Zach Lloyd.
This is for any of the four. What did any of you do to prepare for the LSATs, and what would you suggest as strategies to trying to get through them? It's a tough test.
I did practice tests.
I took a prep course, and I found that really helpful. It was like I was studying on my own. So this is a very long time ago, so I'm trying to remember it all. The logic games, I found, like, there were certain parts that I found I was struggling with, and when I took a prep course, something the teacher taught me just seemed to really help and really click. But also, like, just trying not to be stressed on the day of, like, doing whatever you can to just try to be, like, zen, I think makes a huge difference, because it's timed, it's stressful, and if you are, like, anxious, then that's going to get in your way.
Yeah, you can buy books.
Yeah.
And what I did is I didn't time, so they're timed, right? I learned how to do the test first, and once I learned how to do it, then I started timing myself. It's because you have half an hour, right? I found there was too much pressure in the half an hour. I'd rather learn how to do the questions first and the answers, and then from there you can work at speeding yourself up.
I'd say worry about getting undergrad and finishing your lab first. You get through undergrad and you're doing okay, you'll know how to write tests, and it's just another test. So.
All right. Question.
So, like, what I think is law and psychology also leads to words criminology and clinical. So, are there any other aspects related to our law we should learn in psychology?
Dealing with people, I always try and put myself in the position of where is this person coming from and why might they be acting in the way that they're acting. Doesn't excuse the behavior, but sometimes it explains why, and then it helps you approach how to deal with them. Some people need to be talked back to kind of get them in check. Other people definitely need a helping hand and a coddling. So I think it helps you look at each person uniquely. But I don't think you need a psychology degree to be a lawyer. I think you can have any degree and be a lawyer. If you want to be a patent lawyer, for example, I think you need a science degree or an engineering degree. You know, it depending on what kind of a transactional lawyer you might want to be, having a business background would be really, really helpful. You know, politics background, you know, for some things. But
A good friend of mine from law school had a science background, and she ended up practicing family law, so not related at all to science. And she said the biggest challenge that she found going from like a science degree to law school was just that she wasn't used to having to write so many papers, because she didn't have to write as many lengthy papers in her undergrad. So, but you can have a degree in anything. It doesn't really matter. That there's certain things about law school that might be different than your undergrad, but yeah, you can study in anything you want as your undergrad degree.
Yeah, in my like graduating law class, I had friends that one had an undergrad in math, one had in I think drama, fine arts, like literature. So I don't think it really matters. It's more that, particularly if you're now thinking about what you want to study, something that you like, because you got to like it in order to do well. There's not many people who can really grind out a degree in something that they don't enjoy. And that would have been, there weren't too many in my, that I went to law school with that didn't finish, but the few that didn't, is because they didn't like it, right? And you can't do it all day, every day for 3 years and really not like it. So I think what you study, and again, you talk to many that have a psychology background, and anything you do, you're going to find stuff in it that's going to help you whatever you do, right? So for me now, working in-house at a company, I would deal with probably a lot fewer people than Kelly would, because I don't have or Ashley or I'm sorry, Wendy. Or Wendy.
As long as you don't call me mean things.
So because of that, I know most of the people that I deal with, right? And you build a relationship with them and you can work with them. So maybe some of the interpersonal skills aren't as important for me as they are for other lawyers. Have to deal with a high volume of people all the time. But that's just an example of if you plan it out too far away, it's a lot of years, right? So just kind of taking it as it comes and not being too stressed or thinking you got to do the right thing or the wrong thing. You just end up where you are. And if you don't like it, then you should do something else, right? So.
Okay, thanks for those. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you feel like this for all of you? Do you feel like the money you put into your college and university was worth the money that you take out of it now? The money that you win?
yeah.
Yes.
Even if I wasn't a lawyer, I think there was a lot of value to whether it's college or university, but I would not have been ready to start working at the age of 19 or 20. I think having that time to mature, to learn how to live on my own, but also having the safety net of family and friends around, absolutely, I think it did teach me a lot, for sure.
I think that's a really good question, because it's hard. Like, I paid for my own undergrad, I paid for my own law school, and it takes a while to pay that back, right? Yeah. But I really enjoy my job. And so, I mean, I say that, but still there's sometimes where I'm like, I don't want to work. But for the most part, I really enjoy my job. And I put a lot of value in that, because you spend a lot of your day, a lot of your life going to work. So if you can find something that you enjoy that's meaningful, to me, you can't put price on that, really, right? So yeah, and I also really enjoyed while I was studying. I liked being in school. I liked learning. So there's value to that as well. So yeah, but it's a good question, because it's like the prices keep going up and up. So it's hard to make those choices, right? Yeah.
It's really hard when you're in high school too, just sort of like your perception of time, right? It seems so expensive when you're coming out of high school and seeing how much it's going to cost every year to go to university. It seems like it's so much. How am I ever going to pay this back? But then, and you're not paying it back in a year, right? You're paying it back over hopefully not your whole life, but a lot of time, right? Like, people buy houses and you have a mortgage, and that's normal. Everybody accepts that, right? So same thing is if you don't, then the question is if you don't want to go to university, then that's great too, and that's fine. but it's balancing out like what you want to do. If you want to be a lawyer, you need 2 degrees, right? If you want to be an engineer, you need an engineering degree. Not every job needs this or that or whatever, but going back to like talking to people, you can't, you know, you don't want to, if you make the decision, you don't go to university and you could do this too, and people do this, and you're 27 years old and you decide you want to be a lawyer, that's great, but you're still looking you still got 8 years. It's going to take you 8 years, 4 years undergrad, 3 years law school, 1 year of articling before you're then a lawyer. So that's the only thing to kind of understand is whether you go or not. If you want to do something, you got to understand the steps to take, but it can be kind of overwhelming when you're looking at the cost and you're only looking the perspective of 1 year out and you're thinking, oh man, I only made this much money last summer cutting grass or whatever. Like, how am I ever going to put this together? But you're taking a loan from yourself in the future, right? So it is what it is, right at the end.
Question, good. Okay, so at this point in time, where the
It's a question over there.
Oh,
Yeah.
question. Hey, type the big space. Hold on. So I know that we got to. Some of us have to get out of here. So we have about 3 minutes until the bell. Yeah, there is a question on mass panelists. That's totally fine. Those of you that have to leave because you have to get to your next period class, I get it. When the bell goes, best of luck to you and have a good one. Those that are staying, we have a chance for like a bit of a bathroom break and come back and we'll just keep talking to our panelists. So get a few minutes down. If you have a question, that's fine. I'll come ask them that. Okay, so sure.
But we have an event that I really want to tell you about. It's called Explore Your Future. And it's an evening event where you and your parents or yourself on your own can come to it. It's just a great opportunity. There's going to be probably about 50 exhibitors there that you can just go up to and talk, sort of like this, where you can just ask them different questions, learn about their companies, the careers available within their company, the opportunities, what kind of schooling you would need. It's just a great evening. We're holding 2 of these from 5 to 8 o'clock. One's going to be at the Kitchener Auditorium, May 17th. Mr. Doehn has got a poster so you can get more information, right, from it. But it's really, if you have, I know sometimes you think, why bother with this? But just listening today to these people, this information is so important. I'm up there nodding, and I mean, I'm close to retiring, but I realize I wish I knew some of this when I was your age, because I think we're all so afraid of making the wrong choice, or I've got to decide on this. There is so much out there, and an opportunity like this or like this is such a great chance for you to just talk to people. You might get a part-time job from some of these people. It's a great way to just use your skills. You all use a telephone or your phone, so much. It's a great chance to talk to people and just let them learn about you too. So I hope you look into this. There's one, like I said, and it's free. Sorry, and Jennifer's up there saying it's free. It's free. Yeah, so no charge. So if you can come, bring your parents. A lot of times you need to convince your parents. I don't know. I know I have kids. I always thought I had the plan for them. So parents need to come to this so that you can say to them, Mom and Dad, I'd like to do this or whatever. So thank you. Sorry to take your time.
So the question I'm going to ask the panelists is, we would dealt with kind of the education about it. Once you completed your education, what key moments or events happened that led you to be in the position that you're in today? For somebody that might need tonight, you've got different jobs that you did before, like leading to where you're at today, or it might just be some really good connections that you made, or just being really good at what you do. Like your answers are going to be your own story. So I'm just curious to hear kind of what those are. I know I have to really pick out the people on the end because you're starting. So would one of the middle panelists like to lead us off here?
You're quicker off the draw.
So once I graduated from law school?
Yeah, so once was the education thing? Taking care, what were your steps that led to you working at ATS today?
So if you're a lawyer in Ontario or probably in Canada, it's actually a pretty straightforward process to working for the most part, although I guess they've changed one of the licensing things, which I won't talk about because I don't really know how that works. But so for me, I had, after my second year, so law school is 3 years. After my second year, I got a job at Miller Thompson, which is a law firm in up by University of Waterloo, up Columbia. So I worked there for the summer, and this is, you try to get one of those jobs, and then it's less stress for what happens after. So I went back, had my third year of law school, and then you have to do, they call it articling. So you're working, it's a full-time job, and you are exposed to a broad number of practice areas. So for me, there was like the insurance law was a big thing because there's a lot of lawyers at Miller Thompson that did insurance at that time. Real estate stuff, so buying and selling buildings or houses or whatever. Litigation stuff, like what Ashley does, which would be there's just so litigation just means there's a dispute between people that is serious enough that you actually have to like get the courts involved. So for me, and I'd say probably Kelly as well, we call ourselves solicitors, which are people that do all the routine stuff. So if you ever like buy a house, you deal with a solicitor. It's all sort of like
Sitting at your desk.
Yeah, sitting at your desk. If you're afraid of a judge, then you should be a solicitor and not a litigator. So you expose to different stuff, and then once you finish your articling, then you're a lawyer.
Don't tell us about the bar. You can say the
bar.
If you can pass law school, you can pass the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess I skipped over that, eh? Yeah. So you go to law school, you article, then you write your bar exams. Although you might write, I think I wrote the bar exams before articling.
They kept changing
in there somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't know.
changing it.
More tests, two full days.
We had 8.
8 days?
8 exams.
8 exams. Yeah, I think there was.
Yeah, they
2
changed.
full days of. Yeah. So I was 3 years at Miller Thompson doing work that would be similar to how Kelly has described hers. For me, I liked it all right, but the challenge is people just like call you all the time and they want everything done the next day, and that's fine, but it's kind of stressful, right? Because everybody's always kind of asking why I haven't finished something yet. Which is still the same as what I have now, I guess. So then I work at again ATS, so they sell big equipment systems, and I totally lost the thread of what the question was. How did I get to where I am?
Yeah, so you're at ATS now.
Yeah.
Like what kind of jobs did you find yourself in? Like how did you wind up where you're at today? I think you've answered that, but so you started off the law firm that was at Columbia.
Yeah.
So
I was in private practice. It wasn't quite for me. You just need to be a certain personality type. And I live in Waterloo. I lived in Kitchener before, moved a few blocks to Waterloo. I want to live here. My family's here. We have a house, we have kids. I like Waterloo. So then it's a matter of seeing where else can you get hired to be a full-time lawyer. The company I work at, ATS, it's pretty big. So there's like 10 Ontario lawyers, 1 Ontario paralegal, 5 Germans, 2 Italians, 1 American, and then 3 non-legal non-lawyers in our group. So I still work with a lot of lawyers. I still do a lot of the same stuff, but in this situation, it's you understand what the business wants rather than them having to explain to someone like Kelly a very complicated process that Kelly would then have to learn, right? Like when you get into certain things, it's there's again specialized knowledge. So that's just to say, I work in manufacturing. I was getting around to the question, right? I didn't forget it this time.
I have faith in your abilities.
I work where I work because I want to live in this city, and I like working in manufacturing and with people that really understand building really complex equipment. So that goes to, I didn't necessarily have my background, otherwise I'd work in like construction and things like that, but lawyers are in every sector. So if you really like cool building things, but you're not very good at it, maybe you could be a lawyer that helps them. Or maybe you're, my wife is a social worker, so she would be kind of an on the ground person who would probably support some of the clients that Ashley has, and might even be someone who would introduce those people to Ashley who could help them in those areas. So that's another very different sort of industry area, which if my wife was a lawyer, which she's not, she might do something more like what Ashley does because that's her interest. Or again, maybe you like whatever, sports law or media law, or pick an area, right? But there's a lot of factors. It was rather rambling.
No. So when I graduated law school, it was a 4-month bar exam in 4 months, and they ended it after mine because the firms didn't want to keep paying for it. Yes, yeah. Well, because I was lucky that I got a job in downtown Toronto, and they paid my salary for 4 months while I did the bar, and they didn't want to do that. Not just me, but for everybody. And so anyway, now it's the 2 days, and it sounds far more stressful. So I did my bar exam, and then I had to article, and I was lucky that the firm that I had summered with asked me back to article. It was a firm at the time called Fraser Milner Casgrain. It's now an international firm called Denton's. And when I was there, when I articled, you had to do a rotation in 4 different areas. You had to do business law, you had to do litigation. I also did financial services, and I did employment law. And the benefit of that was I realized very quickly that I am not interested in employment law, and I am not interested in litigation. I don't have the temperament for it. I don't want to do the research the way that you have to do the research for that. I worked with great people doing business law. And so when it came time to being hired back, which you'll hear a lot of lawyers talk about being hired back, I was hired back as an associate in their business law group. And for 2 years, I did private company mergers and acquisitions. All I did was buy and sell businesses, private companies, so that they're not listed on a stock exchange. They are owned by individuals under 50 people, and we would buy and sell businesses. That's all I did. I loved the work. I did not love the hours. I was routinely there till midnight, and I was back at 7 in the morning, and my firm paid for me to taxi back and forth from home, and I worked every weekend, 1 day, if not 2. I didn't like it in that sense. I don't know very many people who would. Anyway, and that's kind of that's what you're doing if you're staying on Bay Street, right? Like, you can make great money, but you're doing those kind of hours.
And what does Bay Street mean, Kelly?
Bay Street is downtown Toronto financial district. You're handling, you're not helping the person who lives across the street from you necessarily buy and sell a house or help with their business. You're helping multinational companies. Like, they need to have a certain amount of money to be able to handle your fees. So they're big companies, cross-border transactions, that kind of a thing. Does that make sense? Thanks. And then I lived in Oakville at the time. My husband's a lawyer as well in Guelph, and our landlord put our townhouse up for sale, and we were required to move, which was the best thing that happened to me because we ended up on a weekend buying a house in Guelph, and I realized I could no longer commute to Toronto. And so I luckily was able to get a job in-house at Sun Life Financial. So I did a stint in-house, kind of like how Graham is. I helped their mutual fund dealer, so I was a mutual fund lawyer for a couple of years. I loved the people. I didn't really love the work so much, and so I did a brief stint at another law firm in town, and then Manulife Financial asked me to join them, and I joined them for a couple of years doing insurance law. And in 2015, I went back to private practice at Sutherland, which is where I am now. I like the independence of private practice in a small firm where I am basically my own business within a business. So it is my job to determine my hours, to determine my clients, to figure out what kind of work I'm going to say yes or no to. It allows me to balance having a family and work in a fulfilling career. And I can tell you, I get up at 5 in the morning, I go into the office, but I leave at 10 to 4 every day, and I don't do work after that because I'm a mom. And being where I am allows me to do that. Very rarely will I work weekends. I'm still able to jam a lot in my day so I can meet the targets that my firm has set for me, because as a lawyer, in private practice, you have to bill and collect. So your remuneration is often dependent on that. So I found a spot that allows me to be me. And you'll hear a lot about lawyers and fit. This fit works for me. And so it was a roundabout way of, yes, I'm a lawyer, but I've been in so many different areas, which actually does help me when I am talking to clients because I have a varied background. I know what it's like, you know, for example, in being in Graham's shoes, not the area of law, but what it's like to be an in-house lawyer. And, you know, if I have issues, I can go and I can farm them out. So if somebody needs a litigator, we can say, okay, you know, here's an Ashley or here's a so-and-so. That can help you in that area. And so by keeping my doors open and being willing to try new things, I found a very circuitous way of figuring out what worked best for me.
Seems like you both have this theme of try something that when you
Yep. Well, and that's the benefit of having an education, right? An education will allow you to try new things. And there's nothing wrong with failure because that's how you learn what you like and you don't like, right? It's if you never try, you'll never fail, but you'll also never succeed.
I didn't get an order here. Who I would like to have asked well.
I can go next. I mean, I think for me, where I am today is a lot of like eliminating the things I didn't like. Similarly to what you're saying, it's like trying something, finding out it's not for you, and then moving on. I think I heard this when I was in law school is like, you're not stuck. And I think that that's really important. So if you're doing something that's not making you happy, there's lots of other cool things to do. So I went to law school in Nova Scotia, but my family was here in Ontario. I knew I wanted to come back to Ontario. So there's a process where the big Bay Street firms will recruit people at different law schools. So I went to the recruiting and I got a summer job working at a Bay Street firm in Toronto. While I was there, I kind of knew it wasn't going to be for me. I didn't think I wanted to work at Bay Street, but I thought, you know, they pay well. It's a good way for me to get back to Ontario. I'll try it. And so I worked there for a summer, which was 4 months. I did 2 months in their litigation team, which is where you're mostly just doing research. And a lot of it is very urgent. So lawyers will be saying, like, I'm in court tomorrow. Look up these 10 cases and tell me what they need. Like you worked a lot during the summer. So 2 months in the litigation team and then 2 months on their corporate team, which was doing more transactional things. I actually kind of skipped my corporate rotation and kept working for the litigation team in my summer there. But before I even went there to that process, I knew I didn't want to be on Bay Street. So I had applied for what's called a clerkship. So instead of articling, which is where you study with, you learn for almost a year with a lawyer, I decided I wanted to do a clerkship where you work for judges. So I went and worked at the divisional court, which is an appeal level court in Toronto. So I assisted judges there. So that job looked like doing a lot of research for judges. If there was a specific area that they hadn't received enough information about for a case, they would tell me, or in advance of a hearing, I would do a memo for them to tell them, like, these are the key issues that you should be paying attention to based on reading all the materials that the lawyers had provided. And sometimes some judges would ask for help in drafting certain parts of their decision. If there was like a legal part that they needed, we work on that, or we'd edit their decisions. But what was really cool about that experience is that, like I said, I didn't know any lawyers. I certainly didn't know any judges. So it was really nice to get to know judges and realize that they're not that scary. They're just like regular people. Lots of them were grandparents. They're very, like, for the most part, very friendly. So that really helped me feel more comfortable being able to be a litigator, because I was like, this big scary person that I'm appearing in front of is just like Uncle Joe, you know, so it's fine. And so I found that really, really helpful. The other part that was really helpful about that experience was I learned what's really valuable to judges. So, like, for example, I always thought if you were a litigator, you had to be like the most dazzling person and best storyteller. But what's really important is actually your written materials that you submit to a judge before you even appear in front of them, because that's going to be the first impression and the first thing they see. So being a really good writer is actually really, really valuable. And so in that experience, it was really helpful too, because my judges would say, like, hey, this is an amazing Toronto lawyer who's going to be before us. Come see them, like, argue this case. So I got to watch a lot of lawyers do their work. So that was really neat. The only downside about that is there's no job guaranteed afterwards. So if you article somewhere, you work really hard for the summer, people like you, you'll likely get hired on, and you'll article and work really hard, and then they'll hire you on as a lawyer afterwards. But I didn't have a job lined up, so I got so that was a bit tricky. I had to do a lot of, like, meeting people, having coffee with people, finding out what firms were hiring. So I ended up getting hired at a firm that does union side labor work. It's adjacent to Bay Street. So they, like, pride themselves on not being Bay Street, but they expect people to work really hard as well and like very demanding expectations. So I worked there for 4 years. And one of the reasons why I went there is because I'd heard that in labor law, with this labor law is when you're working for unions. The unions are your clients. That more junior lawyers, younger lawyers get an opportunity to actually like litigate and argue cases. But so if you go to Bay Street, the idea is you're likely not going to be appearing before anyone for like a few years. And so in labor law, I'd heard that when you're more junior, you can get an opportunity to actually litigate these cases. So, and which was true, which was nice. So I got to have some litigation experience early on. So I worked there for 4 years, and then ultimately I'd had a child, and I decided that I didn't like the hours that were expected of me as a lawyer in Toronto. And also my family was out this way, and I wanted to be out this way instead of in Toronto. So, found a job in the legal aid clinic working as a lawyer. I covered a maternity leave contract, and then I was able to get hired on at the Waterloo Region Legal Clinic. And so I don't know if I really explained very well about the clinic. So we're a nonprofit. We get our funding from Legal Aid Ontario, who ultimately gets their money from the province of Ontario. But we're independent from the government, and we have a criteria that we only provide free legal services to someone if they're low income, and the criteria is very low. So you can't earn much money. For the most part, we assist people that are living in poverty, we don't do any family law or any criminal law, but for anything else, we'll try to help people. So on our team, we have lawyers, we have paralegals, we have social workers, we have an Indigenous justice coordinator who's an Indigenous woman who will provide culturally appropriate services to our clients if they're Indigenous. We have community development workers. So for our role, we do cases. So I do a lot of individual cases where I help people. But we also do what we call systemic advocacy. So we try to advance issues that are important for our clients living in poverty. So maybe we might meet with MPPs and talk to them about issues that we see. We might be writing letters. We might be writing articles to go in the newspaper. And so we do a lot of different types of work. And so ultimately, I'd say I'm very happy where I am. It took a lot of different steps to get there. And again, don't feel like you're trapped somewhere, because you're not.
Okay, last but not least. So keep in mind that I did not go to school for law. So I came into insurance as a 19-year-old person that loved working 12 to 8 because I could go out every night and still make it to work on time. Okay. It actually took a few years. This is going to make everybody shudder beside me. It took a few years for me to realize that we were working in the law, in my profession. It took a few years. It took some entry-level positions, certainly. And then I don't know if there was a point when I realized I could think kind of wider and think critically. But it started to happen that I started to really understand some of the things that they would just throw into some of the courses we were taking professionally, to realize how the industry that I work in really is rooted in a system of law. And it looks at different branches. So Ashley deals with employment law. My industry deals with disputes in employment law. Corporate construction law was mentioned. My industry deals with all of that. So I started to grow, and I actually reached a point where I was bored in my industry because I felt like I was doing the same thing all day long, and it was not getting very interesting. So I branched into a different area, specifically being claims against insurance policies. So that could be anything from your slips and trips and falls, your dog bites, your big 45 vehicle pileup, motor vehicle accidents. It could be product liability when someone is injured by an electric razor or a number of manufactured house furnaces that were manufactured with really crappy motors that started burning houses down all over North America and things like that. So dealing more with commercial businesses in a claims environment really started to click for me, how the law is really applicable to our industry. I relocated to a different city where I wanted to move, and just continued growing where I was. So one of my major jobs now is to advocate for my clients in terms of the correct application of their insurance product to the situation that they're in. So that is, as I mentioned earlier, it is usually when a claim has been declined or denied. For some reason, often it's just sloppiness on the insurance company's end or bullheadedness. And that really was kind of exciting for me because I got to fight. I could never be a litigator. I could never be in front of arguing my points on like a debate in front of a bunch of people. But if it's me versus one or two other people, I can for sure fight for my clients. And I'm really just out there fighting for what's right. That I continued to advance there and eventually grew into more of a strategic growth of my business unit role, hence the current role that I'm doing right now. So now I do a lot more educating of my staff to be able to fight for what's right for our clients. I do a lot of educating my clients about what is reasonable to expect or not to expect from their insurance companies and what truly is reasonable. And in doing that, I get the opportunity to look at some of the disputes against insurance companies, all that happen all day long, guys, all day long. I can give you some bulletins to subscribe to. The first thing I read in the morning is where has coverage been interpreted in favor or against a specific situation, and how did that become litigated to be a groundbreaking decision? And that interests me every day, every single day. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. If you ask anybody that taught me in high school, they'd be like, who, how, what, how did she get there? How she's still living.
So I'm curious, with your current role, does your company employ like an in-house lawyer?
Yeah, so I can speak to that.
Where does she would work on a regular basis?
So I have in-house counsel that would do, we do have in-house counsel. We do actually patch out for externally for legal opinion when our in-house counsel is kind of outside of their realm. My in-house counsel kind of has a widespread range, does a lot of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and a lot of business law. So insurance law actually isn't his forte. Like our panelists have mentioned, you're going to pick your area where you're most confident in, and that's going to be your specialty. And his tends to be more in business law than insurance law, but where we can educate him to fight a smaller issue, we can partner with him. I also have a U.S. team that deals. All right, so let's get into the tough stuff about insurance. Sometimes insurance brokers sell the wrong coverage. So you might be getting your first car soon. Don't. Just keep, they're expensive. Shipping them us. Don't. But when you are reaching out to place insurance on your car, you're going to speak with someone. Hopefully you need to speak with someone. Don't go on the internet and buy it. Okay, speak with a person. And they're going to hopefully recommend things to make sure that if something bad happens, you don't get sued for money that you don't have insurance for down the road. That's called basically providing the best advice to a client. And in an insurance context, if you do not do that, you have made an error or omission. And people in Graham's profession, in Graham's company, will at times make an error or omission. Any lawyer can at times make an error or omission in advising their client. But when it comes to insurance, the consequences of that is we've not told you the right thing to purchase to make sure you're not out of pocket someday if something bad happens. And that is our error. So I deal a lot with those now, and my U.S. team is really well versed in broker errors and omissions situations, as am I, because I used to be a salesperson in insurance. But there's different experts in our organization. And then externally, if there's a rather complex issue, then I need to reach out to someone like a Miller Thompson, or a Bay Street firm, or my favorite law lawyer ever, who's no longer Bay Street. We will do that when we need an area of expertise commented on, for example, auto insurance law or construction insurance law or surety bonding law, that we don't have all of the case law in our abilities internally to reference to make the right decision and then have the right arguments for our client.
So I'm trying to, I'm very curious. So,
Yeah.
Pardon me, I'm not trying to grill.
That's okay.
So on like a regular, Joel, you're not here, that's money and stuff, go this way. On regular weeks, like you clearly are, if I'm getting the right impression, you're doing just a pile of the work on front. How much of your week do you need to consult your in-house or do weeks go by where you don't you're able to manage it all without
So personally, there are weeks that go by that I won't meet him. A lot of it will be educating clients. A lot of it will be just based on experience and how slip and falls shake out in court. In the past, recently, I guess early 2021, there was a new piece of legislation that was passed specifically to do with slip and fall claims when someone slips on ice. So once that issue is put into place, we have some consistency time and time again. I also like to speak to the law and how it relates to my industry, because we do have in-house insurance company counsel. So if you work for an insurance company like Kelly has done before, Kelly has worked for an insurance company in the benefits, retirement, and life space. Property and casualty insurance being on property, being on legal liability for injuries to other people. Those companies need in-house counsel, and they are a very high employer of in-house counsel. So even if you're not considering going into private practice or being part of a large firm or a clinic or even corporate counsel, working in the insurance industry can give you an opportunity to use the areas that you have learned in law to actually run with a case start to finish. We have insurance companies that have entire trial lawyers divisions, and then we have just an insurance claim examiner that has years on years on years of exposure to how these cases shake out, and they have just built up that experience to be able to negotiate disputes outside of trial. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
And all right, so was there anything that the panelists wanted to, that was the end of my formal questions. Let's throw it back to you guys. If there's anything they'd like to mention is important that this group would know before we move on to the question very I
guess the only thing I'd building on what Wendy was saying is, at the end of the day, the legal system is to help people sort out problems, right? And sort out disputes. It's not just lawyers, right? So lawyers are it's a regulated profession. You do this, you're a lawyer. You're a member of the law society, and therefore you're allowed to appear in court or sell your legal services. But similar to what Wendy was saying, I work for a big company. People just sort out things all the time, right? And you're either talking to someone like me or Kelly, trying to help them plan in case something goes wrong, or get to a point where things have gone really wrong, it's a big fight, and they have to deal with someone like Ashley. But there's people just sorting out problems. Then there's people that have a different level of understanding about different things. Maybe they're really specialized in a particular industry, particular aspect of a particular industry, and maybe a little bit of understanding of lawyers. Then you'll have people like me who sit in the company. Then you'll have external people like Kelly that I would go to if it's too complex of a legal question. And then Kelly would go to someone like Ashley if you need to actually go in front of a judge for that judge to help you resolve the problem. So that's just to say that being in the legal profession isn't just lawyers. There's all kinds of people with all different kinds of roles in all kinds of industries that also do sort of the same thing in different ways. So just trying to go back to the theme of like, just talk to everybody, see if you have an interest in what they're doing. Maybe it leads into law, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you realize that being the lawyer isn't who you want to be on the team that solves problems, right?
Yeah, and I would piggyback on that because we were talking at the break. Somebody asked us a really good question about, do you work by yourself or do you work in a team? I work in a team. I have clerks, so they're not lawyers, but they are instrumental to my practice that I could not get through my day without them. And they went to college, they got a law clerk degree. Sometimes they're paralegals where they're actually licensed through the Law Society of Ontario. And we're a team, so I can download stuff to them. So they're still in the legal profession, but they're doing incredibly valuable work. When they're doing the initial drafts, they're actually completing the documents to get, the house sold or the house bought, and dealing with the banks in terms of getting the mortgage instructions. And so there is a broader team, so you don't necessarily have to be the lawyer, but you can still have a career in law at a law firm or in-house or, in an insurance company doing some of this other stuff, working in the law, but not actually maybe going to be a lawyer because maybe you just can't afford it or you don't have the time to be able to do like the 8 years or the funds. So, but there are still a lot of other options.
Yeah, the paralegal program as well. I can't really speak to it, but there are people at our office that are paralegals, and they actually get to appear before like the landlord-tenant board and certain tribunals where they get to do very similar things to what I'm doing, but they didn't have to go for as long or it didn't cost as much. So yeah, I think and they seem very fulfilled and seem to really enjoy what they're doing. They get to do the same sort of thing, like helping people, talking to their clients, doing legal research sometimes. So yeah, that program exists and is great as well.
Yeah, if we had like a perfect world, we would have had more handlers. We would have the corrections officer for everything and police officers and whatnot. There's and that's a really good point. I think you're all reinforcing that if you want to get a career at law, lawyers would probably jump to first in my people, but that's not the only way you can get there. So yeah, really good points. So we'll do the same thing as before. Do you folks a chance to discuss any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists who are more than likely to do that? You guys can take your breath.
I was just going to ask how it can be really busy and I guess stressful, especially out of high school. Everything's happening. You're still trying to figure out your own path. How do you find a balance with everything, and especially outside of just academic?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer in the past over. I mean, I think it's really hard. It's really, really a challenge. I know when I was in undergrad, I also volunteered a lot, and I also worked. I worked at Shoppers Drug Mart for most of my time, and our store closed at midnight, so there'd be nights where I'd be going home and trying to read stuff quick for the next day. It's challenging. And then when I was in law school, I actually decided that I wasn't going to work. And I was I know I'm going to run up my line of credit, but I think it's better for my grades. And it's just a decision that I made. It's certainly really challenging. And at the time, I definitely wasn't focusing on my mental health or taking care of my physical health or eating healthy or anything like that. Now that I'm older, I do. And I also try to make time for my family. I think it's just more, I feel like it's more like a necessity. So I need to do those things in order to be able to be the best lawyer that I can be the best mom that I can be. So I do make time for all those other things. But when I was an undergrad and when I was in law school, it was certainly harder. And I don't think I did it very well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does it very well. It's not easy and it sucks. And it's how it is for everybody, right? So you got to just try to do you can't. I think when you're at this age, don't underestimate sort of the complexity of things in front of you, but that can also be kind of reassuring because there's so many things that can happen that are outside of your control that there's no point in planning too far away, right? So for me, I look at and I said about things there's hurdles that you jump over. Or I look about where I am now, and obviously it's a straight path because I'm here where I am now. There's times that were really hard for me and they weren't hard for anybody else that I was around or whatever. There's other parts that were really, really easy for me and they weren't easy for everybody, right? And be like, oh wow, how'd you do that? That was like really hard. I was like, well, I didn't really, but for me, as I said, like high school, hated it, I did okay, but not great. Then I absolutely crushed my undergrad, and the fact that anybody struggled of my friend group in their undergrad was like completely beyond me. And that was just kind of how it was. Again, Ashley now is again arguing charter cases, and she said she wrote the LSAT a few times, and not to declare LSAT is absolutely no problem for me. But then coming through law school, both Ashley and Kelly both worked on Bay Street firms. I got rejected by about 35 Bay Street firms, but then I got hired here in Waterloo with my first interview, right? So I just mean to say, like, you don't know what's going to be hard and not. And then once you're in the role, some things you just sort of fit in, and it's not that hard because you're just suited to it, or you can't predict what kind of experiences you've had in your past. Well, everything in your past, you couldn't plan for it, you don't have it, and then that door closes, right? But there's always other things to do. So I think what can be hard at this age is you put a lot of pressure on yourself, like, oh, if I don't do this, I'm not gonna do this, right? If I don't get into this program, I'm not gonna do this, right? Like, that's true, but it's true for everything, right? It's just like one thing. So, just to try not to beat yourself up too much, or not put too much pressure on, like, I got to do this or not, because again, we've got Ashley here who's going to talk about a charter decision, and she said she had to rewrite the LSAT, right? I have a friend of mine that I grew up with through high school and everything. He flunked out of Brock, and then he went back to Fanshawe College in London to get some courses, was able to then finish an undergrad, and now he's a Bay Street lawyer, right? So just an example of, like, you can even have times where it's not a matter of just like going a slightly different way because the door seems to be closed. You can, like, completely, again, my friend absolutely, like, he flunked out of undergrad. Like, he went home. He wasn't going to school anymore because they didn't want him there anymore, right? But he decided, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to be a lawyer, and in order to do that, I've got to take those steps. So at the end of the day, it took him 2 years longer than it took me. Like, what's the difference, right? It's a long game. So
And I think what both Ashley and Graham said is right. Nobody has it all together. Like, I don't know anybody who has. Instagram might look great, but there's a whole lot of crap in the background and what life's really like. I worked with a woman, and I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but I totally get it now. Some days I'm a great lawyer, and some days I'm a great mom. I'm never both at the same time. Like, it doesn't happen. I'm either doing a great job for my client and my kids watching YouTube, or I'm a great mom and my clients are getting mad at me. Like, it's kind of the way that it is, I think. And that's not unique to law, because I've been in-house as well, and I see people who are not in law, who are still working long hours, who are still responding to emails on the weekends, who are still struggling, because with the constant onslaught of electronic communication coming at you on a daily basis, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And so, when you start to pick up a phone and call somebody, you kind of gather your questions, be like, okay, here's my 10 questions I have to ask my lawyer. Now it's like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And that's for any industry, right? It comes off, and I want an answer in like 16 characters. And having boundaries. So, like, when I go home and it's mom time, my phone is in a basket and I'm not looking at it, and I will pick it up again when she goes to bed. And that's just the way that it has to be, so that for the 2 hours she's awake that I'm home, I'm there. And we're all doing that. We're all kind of floundering through it and trying to do the best that we can, but know that you're going to make mistakes, and sometimes you're going to totally kill it, but that's part of life, and in terms of learning and figuring it out as you go.
I would say be aware of what things are healthy and not healthy for you as well. So drugs, alcohol, we're not going to play around. It happens. It's in high school. It's in adulthood. So if you're finding that's not healthy for you, then find a way to get away from it. Physical exercise, if you can do it, that is helpful to boundary setting. One thing that I had to look at as well is my volunteer work. Was I still getting out of it something where I felt like it was worth it to me, or did it feel like work? Was it an I have to? So I had to make a change in the volunteer work that I was doing. And gosh, this was only 5 years ago that I had to make this change. This wasn't when I was 21. And I had to go, this is feeling like it's all too much of something that doesn't make me happy. So I found a different space to give my time back in a way that completely enriches my life. So boundary setting and doing something that makes you happy, and knowing what's healthy and not healthy for you as well. Reach out to people in your network, reach out to people outside of your network. And I echo, stay the heck off social media. It's all fake.
Setting boundaries can be really scary in the beginning. Like when I first started out as a lawyer, I was like, felt like I had to answer those emails that came in at 10 p.m. or late, like 2 in the morning. You know, I felt like obligated to do those things. And I wish that I would have just set healthier boundaries for myself earlier, because you're going to burn out. You're not going to be the best. You're not going to even be able to use your brain the way you need to use if you're constantly like not giving yourself any time to do any of the things that are so important. So like feeling comfortable and confident to set boundaries earlier in your career, if you can, is really, really huge.
And if you don't, you will be known as the Ashley always answers in the middle of the night. So that's why I'm calling Ashley instead of someone else.
Yeah.
So just remember that you have control of this. That's a place where you do have control.
Fair enough. Carrie, you have a question?
Yeah. You don't should answer this, but what interesting case story or experience we had working with the job for?
Is that your company?
Heavy truck. It's simple. I'm gonna say it's simple. It doesn't seem simple. It's simple in the terms of my day to day. Super interesting. Heavy truck in a pile up. Heavy truck at 401 or 402, and I have dash cam of my truck made it to a full safe stop, and I have horrific dash cam of the trucks beside and around, flying by, and just smashing people in their cars stopped in pileups. And it's a little morbid. But you can see that there's little tiny miracles and little tiny wins for your client in that situation. There's one driver in 40, 50 cars that made it stopped to a safe stop. Well, everybody was careening out of control. And it's not great video footage, but you can go back to that trucking client and you can say, your safety procedures were on point. Your person did a great job. On the insurance side of that, will they get out of having to pay because there's so many hurt people? Possibly not. So that's where we get into a little bit of complexity in how the law shakes out. But it's super interesting. It's on the daily, there's different stuff.
I guess I'm next. I would say for me, it's the ability to help an average everyday person. So it is not an uncommon occurrence for me to get a call and race up to a hospital because somebody is dying and they need to put a will in place, because if not, their family can't deal with their property when they die. And so that makes a real impact in somebody's life and in their family's life. And not every lawyer will do that. And every lawyer will, I don't charge all that time because chances are they can't afford it. But I will go up and I will meet them on their deathbed and I will take their instructions and turn it around in a day. And that to me is rewarding because I am making a very tangible difference in somebody's life. And I like that. So it's not one particular thing, but it's just, I now have the flexibility to do something like that I didn't have in some of the other places I worked.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have the weakest story of anyone. It's kind of, this is probably for a lot of lawyers where it's, it's a pretty specialized profession. So what you're dealing with and digging through and providing the answers to, they're asking you because they don't have either the time or the background to do all the work, I guess, that leads to a pretty clear answer, right? So somebody has a problem of some sort and they come to you and they say, like, can I do this, or what should I do? And be able to sort of help them out of that, right? And if they're coming to you, likely it's I guess enough stress for them that they don't know what to do one way or the other. But for me to tell you any of those examples, your eyes would probably dry up and fall out of your head, because it would be boring enough. So
I think at Legal Aid, I feel like for the most part, most of the cases that I get to assist with feel like really rewarding. Clients, when we help them, like who are living on welfare, which is nothing. And then if we're able to help them get Ontario Disability Support Program, which is still nothing, and they're essentially still living in poverty, but it's a little bit more money for them. It's like, it makes their world a difference. And so getting the feedback from clients, like how happy and how thankful they are, is really the best part, I'd say. But for me, the encampment case was definitely, at least so far, the highlight of my career. It's been really fulfilling to get to do that work. So
that's a great segue. We've got about 10 minutes left, which I'm sure is not, you could probably talk for hours on your chartered challenge, which would you mind taking 10 minutes to just giving us like kind of a high level, like what was the concern and how you kind of fit it to help with that need? Now, correct me if I didn't read up on this, but like, is it section 15 that's being?
Section 7 was the one we were successful.
Okay, so yeah. Just right left to talk about that, like that's right to life, liberty, security, person. Great fellow. So yeah, if you want to just kind of give us a high level
Sure.
kind of overview of that.
Yeah, so I mean, in Waterloo Region, since the pandemic, the levels of people experiencing homelessness has tripled, and I'm sure you've all seen people living homeless, living in encampments. And so the region of Waterloo owned the property at Victoria Street, and they brought a challenge to court. They were asking for the court's permission to evict the people that were living at this Victoria Street encampment. And this encampment wasn't a park like some of the others. This was a vacant lot. And so they brought an application to court, and they told us that they were doing this. And because we do a lot of work trying to help people from being evicted from their residence, they asked, can you go talk to the people living at the encampment? So we went down to the encampment to tell people what was happening, what they could expect. We signed up, I think, maybe 15 clients. There were between 50 and 60 people living there at the time. And we also, we raised an issue with the judge, the fact that there were people living at the encampment who didn't necessarily have the capacity to understand what was happening, that they were going to be evicted, and they didn't necessarily have the capacity to retain us either as a lawyer. And so the judge appointed an amicus, which is considered to be a friend of the court. So there was another lawyer team that was working to advance the interests of the people who were like the most disabled living at the encampment, who had mental health issues or very severe substance use disorders, who couldn't even really understand what was happening. And so we were responding, and our response was that the way that the government was trying to use the bylaw, the fact that they were trying to evict people from living at this encampment, was a violation. We argued Section 7, which is your right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And we also argued Section 15, which is the equality provision. We won on our Section 7 arguments. We lost on our Section 15 arguments. So our whole argument was based on saying that there are not enough shelter spaces in the region that exist. So if you evict these people, they have nowhere to go. So essentially, you're asking them to go camp somewhere else for the night. They're going to be sleeping in like doorways. They're going to be sleeping on the sidewalk. They don't have anywhere to go. All of our clients were either not receiving any money, or some of them were receiving Ontario Works, which is welfare, and the rates for that, you can't even rent a market. You can't find an apartment to rent at the rates that they get for that. So our argument was essentially there's nowhere to go, plus some of the spaces that exist, like if there are some shelter spaces, the region was trying to say there's enough shelter spaces. Our argument was that there's not, but also some of the spaces that exist don't work for people. So there may be couples that are living together at the encampment, and if there was one space that existed in the men's shelter, they'd be expected to separate and the woman would still have to remain on the street because there's not spaces for her. And so our argument was also that the spaces are not accessible. We also made the argument that at the shelters that exist in Waterloo Region, they're predominantly abstinence only. So if you have a substance use problem, if you use alcohol, use any sort of drugs, you're expected to go into these shelters and stay clean, which is not a reality for a lot of people. So we argue that those spaces aren't practical for these people. They're not accessible. And so the way that the charter works, as you know, you make your arguments about why it's a violation of the charter. So in order to do that, we had experts who provided evidence to support us. We had a doctor who she spent 15 years of her career in London, Ontario, supporting just people that are homeless and just people that are living in encampments. And her evidence was around the harms that happen when people are evicted from encampments. So you see a lot of mental health crisis, you see a spike in substance use, you see people getting frostbite and dying or going out into the bush, trying to get away from bylaw officers and then using substances and having an overdose or a poisoning. And then she talked also in her expert evidence about the benefits of living in encampments. So the fact that people have one regular safe place to stay. So people that are providing services in the community know where to find them. They know if you're going to sign someone up for Ontario Works, or if they have a nurse practitioner who's supporting them, they know where to find them. And there's a sense of community. So people feel safe there. They feel like they can leave their belongings for an hour, go across the street to the soup kitchen, get a meal, get a shower, and their stuff's not going to get robbed and stolen. Women feel safer there than being alone on the street because they're not going to be sexually assaulted. And so she spoke in her expert evidence about all of these things. And then we also had an expert who is a researcher who's studied homelessness across Canada and has published tons of articles. So we had her expert evidence around how living homeless and living in encampments is different for women and gender diverse people. And we had an academic expert from Waterloo Region who talked about how different municipalities have cleared encampments in different places in Ontario and the harms that those have caused. So we had a lot of expert evidence to make our arguments that evicting them when there's nowhere to go would be a violation of their right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And now when you argue a charter violation, there's something called the saving provision, which is section 1, which you probably learned about. So our rights are not unlimited. The government can limit our rights in a free and reasonable society. But when you're making section 7 arguments, it's really unlikely that the government's going to be able to say there's a reason, because the rights are so fundamental. Your right to life, a government should not be able to limit that without a very significant reason. So some of the cases include something like war or potentially maybe a pandemic, but not because they need a vacant lot for no reason. So we were successful in section 7. We were not successful in section 15. And this is the first case of its kind in Ontario, which is really exciting. So it's a set of precedent here in the province. And there's other municipalities who've been reaching out to us to ask how we did our case and what support we can offer to them, because there are other encampments all across Ontario and different municipalities are trying to evict them. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the case if anyone wants to ask questions. It was a really condensed time frame. We did the case, we got retained in June, and the case was heard in November, which is kind of unheard of for charter cases because you have to put together a giant record, which means you have to have a lot of materials to show to the court to make your case. And so our team was working on it basically around the clock. It was really intense, but yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I heard that they were not looking to appeal to the...
That's right. So the region could have appealed to the Court of Appeal.
Were you hoping they would? Were you the students are...
Yeah.
I'll take the win and walk away.
Well, it's kind of, it would have been cool to go to the Court of Appeal. And I think, I felt like the decision was really great. So I think we hopefully would have got a good decision from the Court of Appeal, which would have been even better of a precedent for people in Ontario. But it's also a huge relief not to have to do that work and have that stress. Practically also, a lot of our clients have scattered, so it would have been hard to connect with them and to get instructions even to do that might have been tricky.
So based on how things were left, like when the region decides not to pursue this, is that like they will never pursue it, or is for right now they're not pursuing it, or?
Yeah, so the decision actually said, the judge said if you correct the problem and you want to come back and have this ordered, like rescinded, you can. And I think Karen Redmond said in the news that they were considering doing that. Yeah, but the difference is that like there's 1,100 people that are homeless as of the last point in time count, which was 2021. And at the moment, they only have 500 shelter spaces. So there's still a huge gap in what exists. If they can come up with 500 shelter spaces, great. But I'd almost rather see the resources spent on like more permanent housing, right? Because a shelter is, it's not a home.
I'm sure we could talk about this for hours. Yeah. Okay, so our panelists need to leave. So before they leave, let's give a round of applause, please. Thank you so much for volunteering your time. I really appreciate it. You grab your stuff and we'll get a runner to take you back.
Thank you.
Joel, you want to do my rough? Okay, that'd be great. And yeah, it was really, really interesting, and thanks a lot.